We have Animesh, who is going to talk us through navigating bug bounties from NAs to P1s. So thank you, Animesh.
Cool. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining to my presentation today about my journey of how I've gone about from NAs to P1s in bug bounties. If you're like, what's an NA and what's in P1, we'll get to that in a bit. A little bit more about me, I guess, not a lot more, but I'm Animesh. I come from Nepal. I came to Sydney around like 7 years ago now to study my bachelor's in IT at UTS, and after completing that, I started penetration testing, and I guess since then, I've pretty much fallen in love with hacking web applications mostly. So I started my role as a pen tester, and then I started using Twitter because everyone's like, oh, that's where you go to see the latest and the best. And shortly after, I came across this post by someone, not actually someone, but I forgot to redact the name. Looks like the hashtag. So anyways, so 4 years ago, I came across this post, and then I was like, ooh, so someone got like 15K for an IDOR. How does that work? Started looking into it. And turns out there's this thing called bug bounty programs. And what bug bounties essentially are, it's basically if a company has a bug bounty program, they're inviting researchers from around the world to, come and try and find issues in them. And if the researchers do find an issue, the company will reward the researcher. How it commercially works, I guess, there's managed bug bounty programs. So primarily like HackerOne, Bugcrowd, Integrity, and YesWeHack. They're like the four major companies that do manage bug bounty programs. And so, for example, you're a company and you want to run a bug bounty program, but you don't want to have to go through all the logistics of it yourself. You go out to one of these four companies and they'll do the hosting for you, and they'll also validate the vulnerabilities that come in, and then you just have to worry about filtered stuff and just I guess. Apart from managed bug bounty programs, there's also big companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, I guess Meta now, who host it in their own platform, and they don't really use like HackerOne or Bugcrowd. So in terms of, I guess, categories within bug bounty, there's private and public programs mostly. So the public ones are obviously ones that are public. You can see them, I can see them, anyone can see them, and we can go and, I guess, find and submit bugs in there. There's also private programs. So once you do sign up to one of these platforms and submitting bugs, you also get invited by some other companies who don't want to, I guess, put it out in the public that they run a bug bounty program. So you get invites, and those are you can then hack and submit on them. And those ones are private programs. The way the reward works in bug bounty, it says I guess most platforms claim it to be, will reward you using CVSS. We'll set the severity using CVSS, or Bugcrowd has a thing called VRT. But at the end of the day, what I've experienced so far, it's literally just business impact. Like, what impact does the bug you submit have on this company? That's how I have experienced the final severity of what you're going to get is set. This is how it usually works if you do go to one of the platforms. Let's say you find a bug in Amazon and you want to submit it. You sign up to HackerOne and submit a bug to HackerOne. HackerOne does the initial triaging. So what triaging is really, so you're only going to get rewarded if your bug hasn't been submitted by anyone else first. So HackerOne validates that you're the first one to submit. They also ensure that it's in scope, so you can't just go into Amazon's buildings and find a bug in there and then submit it to Amazon, right? It has to be within scope of what Amazon wants people to be hacking on. Then it also has to be a valid bug, so you can't just submit things that you think are bugs, but it's not actually a bug. After that, HackerOne also sets the initial severity of what they think the company should reward it as. And after that, it gets pushed on to Amazon, right? So then Amazon looks at it, and I've personally never experienced it, But apparently there are cases when the company just says, oh, we know about this bug and they won't reward it out. But I've personally never experienced that. And then at the end, the company, Amazon, decides the severity, and then whatever severity they decide, you get rewarded. So why did I get started? So I started pen testing. And then like I see all these different things that I now have to learn. And I'm like, it's going to take forever. There is like some experience that I gained through the engagements that I was doing, and obviously doing labs and whatnot on the side. But I wanted to do like, speed up this process a little bit. So bug bounty to me looks like the perfect opportunity where I could hack and validate what I've learned on live targets, and then also make money while doing it. So I started in, right? And then I discovered that companies reward like really low severity bugs as well. Like for example, initially I was submitting stuff like I was trying to find every single like contact form there is out there, and then check if it has a CAPTCHA or any sort of rate limiting. If it does not, bounty. Submit a couple, get paid, and then I'm like, this is easy. Just do this over and over and over 100 times and I'm rich. Didn't really work out that way. I think those two were the only ones that ever got paid out of like, I don't know how many I submitted. And I also figured out that, okay, so, I'm not really going anywhere here. I'm not really learning anything. And like, this is not progress. This is not why I started doing this. So I was pretty much stuck in this cycle of having really weak leads that I would just submit without, trying to escalate or anything. And then it would either be marked as not applicable, or, someone else would have submitted it before even. And then I also really always like avoided stepping out of my comfort zone of whatever I knew. So maybe I would learn one thing and then just go and try that whatever I learned in the program. And then if it didn't work, I didn't really try and ever push, okay, what else can I do here? Before I started bug bounty, like there was like plenty of people who always say, look at the GraphQL introspection, try and make your own queries that the UI is not using. Look at JavaScript files, try and find links that the application is not using through the UI. Even knowing that, it was still like an extra step that I wasn't really willing to bother, because it's not fairly easy to read minified JavaScript, right? Who wants to read minified JavaScript? I would pretty much just let the HTTP traffic go through my burp and then active scan it, and then just wait for burp to start blinking red, and then at the end it would just be a TLS issue, right? So that sucked. And at some point I just told myself that, look, if I want to progress here, I'm going to switch to this. I'm not going to switch any program, and I'm going to keep hacking on it until I find my first high severity bug. Shortly after that, the program I was hacking on added some new scope that looked really interesting, because with new scope comes new assets that's probably not been as hardened, because like it's new and maybe it's not been pen tested, or maybe other hunters have not looked at it as well, right? So this application looked like this. So there were two, I guess, major applications as part of the newly added scope. There was an employers app, and there was this job seeker app. The job seeker was a mobile app. So if you're a job seeker, you would go on the mobile app and sign up there. And if you were an employer, you had a web app for you. One day I log in, just, as part of my normal hacking routine of just log in with one of the accounts that I thought I had been using. And then suddenly this specific page called shift types had been populated. Like I was seeing all this information that I had not seen before in my account. And then I could pretty much tell very quickly that this belonged to other companies. So I wasn't really sure how I found a bug, but I was sure that it was a bug. I was like really scared that it's going to get duped if I don't submit it like now and then. I don't care about how I found it. The point is, I found a bug, and this is the account that I found it with, so figure it out. That's not what I did. I mean, I did submit it initially, but I was pretty sure that I would have to at least find out, how this bug, like how they could reproduce the bug, so at least they can fix it then. So I took that email account and searched it through my Gmail history, and I saw just two emails. The first one was from months ago when I had first signed up using that email in the mobile app. And the second one was the day when I found the bug. Because what had happened was, during that day, I thought that I had been using this account to sign in. So I did a password reset from the employer app. So it turns out I've never actually signed up for this employer app using this email. But because I had already signed up in the mobile app, when requesting a password reset via the employer app, somehow it triggered a bug that led to an elevated account being created in the employer app. So that's cool. At this point, I realized that, okay, so bugs exist. If I give it enough time, then I will find bugs. And then while I've submitted the bug and while it's being triaged, because I was able to see all this information of other companies, I'm thinking this is a cross-organizational IDOR issue. You know, it has to be maximum impact. Probably going to get $4,000 to $10,000 for this. And then the company told me that, nope, yes, it's a cross-IDOR issue, but there's not really any sensitive information in there. At that moment, I was like really sad, really devastated, you know. Bug bounty, not going to do this again. Never going to find a critical bug. It's a scam. But when I do look back, and then I guess it's also a bit of a realization that I had at that point that I did not before, was that bug bounties, like if you want to get the big bounties, you got to really find big impact, right? And when I say big impact, it's things like zero-click account takeovers, remote code executions, or at least like session hijacking. So up until this point, whenever I used to hack on any program, I used to have this mentality when checking for usual bugs that this is a public program, right? There's like 10,000 other people looking for bugs in this. There's no way I'm going to find an authentication, like an issue in the authentication flow. But I guess since this point, I learned that, I guess, it's pretty bad to, you know, assume anyways in security, but this was like a pivotal point for me in terms of bug bounty, to never like assume or never like skip testing on the basic stuff at least. So then I started, because the bug I found earlier was in an authentication flow, right? Not in an authentication flow, but more like something was fishy in the authentication flow. So I started looking at the auth flow for this app from request number 1, right? When I go to this page, there was this form where I could enter my email address and press on continue. I guess before we move forward, this isn't actually like target.com. I've used like Target and like target.com, vulnerable.com as placeholders, because just out of respect to companies, to not say, hey, you know, I found bugs in all these like companies. So when I pressed on continue, this was the difference between the mobile and the employer's app, mobile and the web app, right? For the web app, they were using this parameter in the GET request called profile type employer for the employer app, and then and doing the same thing on the mobile. The only thing that changed was the profile type job seeker. If you just press on continue after that, for the web app, it would show a form to enter your password, and for the mobile app, it would actually redirect you to the company's SSO page. This is what the response to those two requests looked like. So for the employer app, the response type was legacy. Sorry, not the response type. The type in the response for whatever type was legacy. And for the job seeker in the mobile app was redirect. And so I thought, okay, so I wonder what happens if I switch the response type to redirect before the JavaScript in the web app consumes it. And I saw this. So turns out there was an OAuth flow if I change it to redirect in the web app. And if I just let the authentication flow continue, it would redirect me to the same SSO page that the mobile app was using. And then after logging to the SSO page, I would then get redirected back to the employer web app. Now this was interesting because this is totally new attack surface. As in the login page of the web app, there's no button to go like login with SSO. There's just this option to enter the password, right? So OAuth and a new attack surface. After that, no more assumptions here, like no more thinking. There's not going to be an open redirect in a public program's OAuth flow. Okay, before we get to that, I guess what was happening here was there was this piece of JavaScript in this web app where I guess so after you pressed on continue in that UI earlier, how you logged in depended on what your account type was. So the legacy would just be the password form, and then the redirect, it would do the OAuth flow. So that's what happened in my case. And then I found my first high severity bug. This OAuth flow was vulnerable to an open redirect, and then basically when you do have an open redirect in an OAuth flow, you can steal the victim user's OAuth code and then exchange it for a token when certain conditions are met. I guess OAuth deserves a talk on its own, so I'm not going to go any more than that for now. But I guess the gist of it was by modifying the response type of how I was logging into the application, I discovered this OAuth flow. And there's probably other people who looked at this application as well before me. I'm pretty certain of that. And this was a fairly straightforward bug in terms of what you can do with an OAuth flow. It's one of the first things I checked. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't found before because no one really bothered looking at the mobile app or didn't know that the thing redirect existed instead of legacy. And most importantly, no one looked at the JavaScript files. Even I did not, right? Just going back to the importance of JavaScript files, I guess, it is just so important when you're hacking a web application, because there's just so much in a web application that's not in the UI itself and that you're not going to find by just clicking on buttons. So from this point onward, I guess, what I've realized is that when hacking, the only assumption that you can really make is to assume that everything you hack is, or everything you're assessing is at least vulnerable. So that OAuth is done, but I wanted to find more bugs in this application. And after spending some time, I found multiple self-stored accesses. Those self-stored accesses everywhere, right? But I didn't really know what to do it with. Fortunately, just around that time, I had started listening to this critical thinking bug bounty podcast, and I didn't really understand what they were talking about at that time, but they kept going on and on about how they changed how they did things with the self-stored accesses and changed it with login CSRF, logout CSRF, what the hell's going on. I had no idea when I was listening to that, but what I did understand, the gist of their podcast or that specific part was that there was a self-stored access, and they managed to escalate it to a session hijacking vuln, right? So usually in XSS, there's three basic types: reflected, stored, DOM, DOM-based XSS. But what I have here is a self-stored XSS, and usually by itself, it's not really exploitable. Let's say you've got this e-commerce application that goes, hello, your name, ready to discover amazing products, or whatever. You go into your profile information and you change your username to an XSS payload. And then when you go back, it pops this alert saying, alert 1, okay, you've got XSS. But then you can't really exploit this as of now. Because if you do, convince someone else to visit the same URL, what they're really going to see is just their profile. But let's say you also have a session fixation vulnerability where you can somehow, log them into your account via a single request. And now what happens is that when they visit this URL, they see the XSS payload injected and it fires. But what's the point, right? Usually with XSS, you get the victim to visit a URL, or you've got a self-stored XSS and they open a page where you've got a stored XSS where they open a page and the XSS fires, and your goal at the end usually with an XSS is to either get their session token so then you can take over the session and then do things pretending to be them in their account. So the issue with this right now is that even if you have a self-stored XSS and just to log in CSRF, all you're basically doing is you're logging them into your account, right? So even if you have an XSS, you can't really steal their token because it's your account where the XSS is fired. However, things change when single sign-on is in use. Things change when single sign-on isn't used. So how does single sign-on work? You've got this page you want to log into. You've got this e-commerce app you want to log into, and you click on login, and you get redirected to a different application, which usually is the, like the main single sign-in, like main login page for all the applications for this company. And if you ask, like, why would someone do that? It's not just one application that this company may have. So in order to simplify authentication a little bit, they may implement an SSO where, you just have one place where you have to think about how to handle authentication. So how does that changes things for us, right? Let's assume this, like, we're using this application. We click on login and we get redirected into the SSO page. Now what we have is, after logging in the SSO page, we've established a session in this SSO page. And however, whatever like method is used to implement it, whether SAML or OAuth, after you log into the SSO page, you still have to be redirected to the application page. And usually how it works is that a new session is generated for your application that you're using as well. So when you're logged into this e-commerce application that you're using, you're not just logged in there. You also have established a session in the SSO page that you have in your browser. So how do we move on forward from here? First step, let's assume that a victim has, navigated to this URL, and then sorry, what's there? Okay, yeah. And what we have here right now is the victim. In the victim's browser, we've managed to log them into our account, but just in the e-commerce application. There's no alert one here this time. Instead, there's a script tag pointing to a JavaScript file somewhere. The JavaScript looks something like this. First, it'll create an iframe that will what the JavaScript will do here is it'll create an iframe in the page where it's going to use the victim's existing SSO to log them back into their iframe, log them back into their account. So although like on the outside, on the main page, we still have our JavaScript and they can still see our like name and everything because that's already loaded in the DOM over there. Inside the iframe, they've logged in back into their account, and a new session has been established. So now our session ID does not exist in the browser anymore. It's been replaced by the new session from the iframe. So what we do is, using the same JavaScript, it was waiting for 5 seconds and waiting for the victim to be logged back into the account. What it's going to do is now read the updated session cookie that's been established in the browser and then yield it to the attacker. So I was pretty surprised by how prevalent this is, and this is probably because companies really don't care to fix self-stored XSS because, how can it really be exploited? I guess that's the mentality. I've just shown how it can be exploited. And I guess there's also a lot of, for example, if this was just me, like 2 years or 3 years ago, I would have submitted the self-stored XSS as it is, and the company would have gone, "No, you can't really exploit it," and it would have just been that. I've been able to use this technique over and over and over and over again because, I don't know, it's just out there. And I don't even like proactively look for a self-stored XSS in an application. It's just there. And when I do find one, then it's, like tingles my fancy, I guess, because there's just so many different ways you can exfiltrate like someone's token using this self-stored XSS plus login CSRF chain. However, in terms of impact, it'll never ever really be that high in bug bounty because there's just so many caveats. Like even from like let's say you run security for this major application and you've got so many issues to deal with, and you're not really going to care as much about this issue where the preconditions are that the victim user has to be logged into their account, and while they're logged in, they also have to click on this link or visit a malicious page to finally, and then the attacker may finally get their session token. So it might not just be their priorities, right? And even from like a bug bounty hunter's perspective, like yes, like it is weaponizable and you can keep submitting it to make some money, but it's a total pain to write reports for these. There's like a 20-step report for how to, set this up, and then like what you have to do as an attacker and a victim user for all it to work. And then like you can notice there's like 27 comments and 20 comments in there, right? So it's just me going back and forth with triagers saying, oh, this is not working. Okay, do this. So it's very painful as a bug bounty hunter as well. And as I started engaging more with the community, I guess I sort of learned that the real impact, security-wise and even bounty-wise, is in the server-side bugs. So while I was starting to get more engaged with the community, I came across this course by Jay Haddix last year. And I had previously watched some of Jay Haddix's talks as well. They were really good in terms of giving me a start for both just generally hacking a web application or generally approaching an attack surface. And I was really keen to do this. And thanks to my boss, and I feel very fortunate that, those things are taken care of by my workplace, and I did this course. So how this course really worked is during the course, Jason Haddix would pick a target, and then during the 2-day course, he would basically do reconnaissance, while also that, basically as a testament to these techniques that I'm sharing you in this course are not just techniques that don't work. They actually work, and I'll show you results in 2 days. So the target for my cohort, I guess, was this really large car manufacturing company. And they had this really interesting scope section where at the bottom of their page, they had this other target domain section where they basically said, we may award a small bonus for these assets, but only valid high critical and exceptional findings. So what other target domains essentially means is anything owned by this, any domains or any subdomains owned by this car manufacturing company, and that opened, our reconnaissance possibilities really wide. So at the end of the course, he gave out this spreadsheet where there were a lot of subdomains, and then everyone started looking into it, and shortly after, I came across this subdomain that looked really sus after I was Google talking for it a bit. I opened the page, and it's a bunch of SOAP APIs just exposed. I guess if you're like, what's SOAP? I was told that it's basically REST APIs for people in the 90s. So this is a bunch of SOAP APIs, and I find out that there's WSDL files as well available there. So using Burp's WSDL extension, I make a bunch of sample requests and I start sending them. But no matter what I did, I just could not get the error message to change. It was just this same error message that would not change. And I was really hopeful that, it would tell me what I was missing in my request, saying, you're missing this parameter of this content or this content type. But it didn't happen. So what I did, instead of just moving on, I took the domain, and because we were sort of hacking in a group along with the course, I dropped it in the chat. And a few minutes later, someone messaged me saying, hey, I was able to get the SOAP request working. You want to collab? This guy is very kind, because he could have just, gone ahead and reported it, and I would have never known about it, which just shows to highlight, I guess, collaborations are really good in bug bounties. I was initially really scared to share anything I was doing at all, thinking, they might just go ahead and report it, and I might never know about it. But I guess after I've started collaborating with other people, sharing what I have and sharing what they have, I've been, I guess, able to learn much faster in bug bounty. So I also asked him, because I really wanted to know what I was missing, and what I had been essentially doing is just I guess sending the sample requests the WSDL created and not really pushing further than that. And he mentioned that, okay, so I just added this after that error message. And then it started telling me that this is not, it started giving me all these error messages that were informational enough to create the final SOAP request. So we ended up submitting it, and I guess it was pretty impactful as well in terms of what we were able to do with it. For a specific country, we were able to access names, addresses, what car they had for 50,000 of them. And you might be like, what? Is that all the bounty you get? But remember, from the previous scope section, this is just a bonus and not really bounty. And I wasn't really upset as well, because we were having a lot of fun just hacking these because they were so vulnerable. this was also a really important point for me in my like bug bounty journey so far, because before this I didn't really know what I was missing. Like I would feel like, you know, sometimes like I would find really interesting assets but not really able to push them further. But this like collaboration basically told me that I just need to, you know, spend that extra bit of time and see what is the every single thing I can try against this instance when I do find interesting stuff. So I had over 30, Jason had in the data he shared, there were around 30,000 subdomains. And the entire, like the gist of this course was that, you know, if you can get to a subdomain before someone else does it, you're going to find a lot of bugs in it. So I was like, well, we've got all this data. What if there's one git config file in there that, you know, that is exposed, and let's try it out. And to my surprise, there was one target in there that had the git config exposed. I download it and I see that there's the GitHub personal access token in the git config file. At the moment, I guess I didn't exactly know what to do with it and how to see like what I can do with it. So I just git cloned it. And so I accidentally got access to a lot of source code. So moving on, reported that, gets paid out, but we have access to a lot of source code, right? So I started looking into them, and one of the first things I do when I do get access to source code is run like a SAS scanner. And in this application, I think every single SQLi query that was there was vulnerable to SQLi. So I took all the endpoints and then I, you know, find all the parameters that I need to do, and then and then try out the, you know, magic SQLi tree that no one knows about. And turns out like all of these were in fact vulnerable because before this point, you know, like I only had access to source code. Maybe the code was old and they fixed it, but now I was sure that I had a lot of SQLis here. So I start sending out requests and then I get blocked. Frustrating. There's a few ways around this. So this error specific was from AWS, and I really hate their WAF. So there's a few ways to get around this, right? What's really happening so far is, in order for our SQLi to work, we need to reach the application server at least. But right now, we're getting rejected by the WAF in between. So there's this, in terms of getting around WAF. You need to be really elite and be able to write like gibberish SQL that the WAF may not recognize. And it's not my skill issue, it's the WAF skill issue. I was just lazy and I didn't want to do all of this because I would have to do this for potentially for every single endpoint, find a new one. So I didn't want to spend all that time. Second is, if we find the origin IP address and hit the target server directly, that would be fun as well, because there's no WAF in between that's going to stop us anymore. I tried this through looking at historical DNS records from ZoomI, Nmap, however, nothing, no success there. So what else? Just around that time, AssetNode had released no WAF fees. And essentially how it works is that so WAFs have to process the request and basically scan whatever we're sending in order to find out what's being, like what to block and what to let through, right? And what NoWAF does is typically this is a burp extension, so you can install it in your burp. And if the payload you are sending is part of the request body, what you can do is put a lot of zeros or a lot of junk before whatever you're sending, so that the WAF does not see it. Not necessarily does not see it, but it's just that the WAFs have limits to how much data they can process. And for AWS, I think it's like 64 or 128, regardless. So, however, there's an issue here. All of the SQLis I had was in GET requests, so I couldn't really already use this. I kept this to the side, you know, and went back to the code to see what else was there, because there were a lot of bugs there, man. So as soon as I go back into the code, one of the things I noticed that they had this endpoint that was using DOM PDF to convert user-supplied HTML into PDFs. And I think server-side HTML to PDF converters are just like vulnerable by design. If you just like leave them to default settings and do not like apply extra protections to them, because what this allows is it significantly expands our attack surface on the server side. For example, right, I can supply this HTML with an image tag pointing to a favicon, and it's going to return me the favicon. And how it works is that when I do send that post request, the PHP runtime in the server will fetch the favicon that I requested in the image tag and then give it back to us. So that meant that now I can make the GET request that I need using the PHP runtime on the server side. How that would work, like similar to the earlier one, was when the PDF renderer tries to convert the GET request, convert the image, I guess fetch the image for us so that it needs to put it in a PDF and return it back to us. It's going to do it on the server side. Our SQLi will trigger, and then we will notice a significant delay from when we send the request to when we receive the response to confirm our SQLis. However, this is still an issue because WAFs still see the payloads that you're sending in the body as well, right? It's not that, it's just the first line that they're going to see. However, we've got no WAF fees from earlier. So now what we can do is use the post request and put a lot of junk before we put in our payload. And when it reaches the server, because it's going to be too much for the WAF, because it's not going to see anything after a lot of zeros that we have at the start, the PDF converter is then going to try and fetch the GET request, and our SQLi will then be triggered on the server side because it just makes the PDF runtime will just make the GET request to the local host, and it doesn't have to go through the WAF, right? So that way I was able to, I guess, take a GET request SQLi and then find something else, find this PDF converter, put the GET request inside of the post request so that we can put a lot of zeros before our payload and the WAF doesn't see it. And finally, when the server-side PDF converter does try to convert whatever HTML we supplied, the SQLi will be triggered and we see a significant response. This is what the final request looked like. It was quite painful to try and figure out all these like Spanish characters in order to make a successful request, but it did work in the end. So then I have like 10 SQLis, right? Based on what they had paid out before, I'm assuming like it's going to be like 7,000 euros, and I start visiting a Vision Pro. But shortly after, the program's like, hey, thank you, but we're going to mark everything as high. Thank you for your efforts to secure our program. What we've been told is that you don't really have any write or delete privileges to the SQL tables. However, I was pretty confident that that could be overturned because in the source code, there were insert statements, so there had to be write privileges at least. So to validate that, I did these 5 requests. First one, I created a new database. So this was like obviously SQL, and it was way too much to put in this slide, so I just wrote it like that. How it worked was I wanted to prove that I could delete as well, and I didn't want to delete anything that they had. So to prove that we can write and delete, what I did was firstly I created a new database and then wrote SQL so that it sleeps for 3 seconds if the DB creation was successful. And then I could see it in the HTTP response time. After I create, I do another SQL query, which basically checks if the DB that I created exists, and then sleep for 3 seconds again to validate. Because now we've validated that, we've created a new database successfully, we can even show that we can delete as well if we have the privileges. And to show the differences, I deleted the database that I had created, and then I also deleted another database that did not exist. Because they might just go and say, oh, the server just started responding after 3 seconds whenever you send a request. Now, if I don't have that difference between my proof of concept and something that should not work. And then finally, I also repeated the second step in here, because that's also, again, to show the same difference, because it did sleep earlier, right? After I created the database and I ran the SQL query to check if the database exists, it did sleep earlier, but now that I've deleted it, it definitely does not exist. And that way I was able to, I guess, be sure and show them that I've got all these privileges. They overturned all of that, and then paid out all of the bugs correctly. And I guess that's how I found like 10 exceptional submissions in integrity, which were my first 10 submissions there as well, which was a lot of fun. I guess so far, what I had learned to this point was context is super important when you look at a bug in any application, right? When you give the bug any context to, like how does this bug affect this application, rather than just look at the bug by itself, there's a lot of possibilities that can be done, and I guess the other thing is that I learned from here is that still don't rush too much. Even if you have a valid POC, see what you can do, push it as much as you can without doing anything that harms the application, and then report. Final thing, I wouldn't say that was a complex bug, it was just that I had certain things there in context that worked for me, and then it was fun. But usually there's this assumption that even I had that, probably all these big bounties are super complex, 10, chain of 10 requests or whatever that get the big bounties. Not really. Because the first remote code execution I ever found was literally a PHP web cell on an upload endpoint. Sometimes people say that, real life applications are not anything like the CTFs and labs you do. But I guess this was a bit of a realization for me as well that, these bugs that we do in Juice Shop or whatever can exist in the application that is out there in the public as well. The funny thing about this was that I made this push request on Friday, and then before making this push request on the same endpoint, I also tried a few get requests and put requests, and everything was returning 200. So I made this request, and I didn't even bother to check if it had uploaded somewhere, because there was no nice UI that would just let me show me the uploaded file. So I actually just left this for 2 days, and then later on I was like, oh, I should probably check if that file uploaded somewhere. So I guessed that, okay, so the upload was in the /upload endpoint, so it probably uploaded to uploads, and then to my surprise it was there. It was paid out as a P1, which was my first remote code execution bug that I ever found in Bug Bounty since I started doing Bug Bounty. And I guess I also learned that, keep it simple at times. There's no 10 request chains. It's just about, keeping it simple and, looking at what's happening in the application. I guess just sort of starting to wrap things up. It's super important when doing bug bounty to understand how everything works in the application, and not just look at one application, but instead look at everything it's connected to. Whenever you do find low severity bugs that may not have impact instantly, if you I guess give them context and see how they can affect the application, or in the best case scenario, you might have a critical severity bug that needs that low severity bug that you found from 2 months ago. So I guess when you do find bugs, look at them from a wider perspective to how it affects the entire ecosystem, and not just how what the response is for that specific bug. The other thing that I've realized is business impact is much more important than technical complexity of bugs. The highest bounty I've ever received is literally for accessing a PDF on an S3 bucket. And I guess I almost didn't report it as well, because it's just a PDF, right? What's going to happen in a PDF? But apparently it was super important to the business, and I received a pretty big bounty for just finding a PDF. The other thing is that most of the bugs that I showed today here were mostly web bugs, but I know that there's all sorts of bug bounties right now. Like if you're good at whether you're good at black box hacking or like whether you're good at source code review, like you can apply almost everything to bug bounties. There's also like car hacking stuff. Like I know Tesla, BMW have like an automotive automotive bug bounty where if you do find bugs in hardware stuff, you can, you'll get rewarded for them. And I guess I don't want to say that mental health isn't talked about, but I've experienced it and I've felt it that it isn't practiced enough, right? Bug bounties are like super addicting because you're pretty much gambling I guess like that's just my POV of it, right? You're pretty much gambling your time, effort, motivation against like you find a bug, hopefully find a bug and get a big bounty for it. And I pretty much feel like, Goku when the bounty gets paid out for like 5 seconds, but like when you're just like trying to find bugs, you probably find like, for example, I found like 50 bugs over the past 2 years, like there's 700 days, and there's probably not been a day that gone by where I haven't thought about a bug. So once you like, I guess, do like start doing bug bounty, it's super important that you keep like your health, your life, and because like you don't just live by yourself. There's people around you. And just like, I guess, give all of those things importance as well, along with, finding bugs and winning. Cool. That's the end of my talk. Open to any questions.
Thank you, Animesh. Any questions?
I'm curious to hear if you've noticed like AI or LLMs changing the landscape of bug bounties at all. Like, have there been classes on bugs that's just been wiped out or anything like that?
That's a kind of a tough question. Well, I guess, I don't know how to answer that. Damn. I guess, I think there's probably, with time, there's probably going to be bug hunters who are going to use LLMs to, find certain bug classes. But I think most of the bug bounty, right, like platforms advertise that there's like 1 million people who do bug bounties, but it's probably like maybe 10,000 or 20,000 that do it full time and do it seriously, right? And I can tell that the bugs that those guys found are probably not going to be found by LLMs yet.
I was just going to ask 2 questions actually. First is, like, I've heard of HackerOne complain about people using AI to submit bug bounty reports. Keen to know what you think is the future with regards to what AI is going to do with regards to that. And secondly, how long did it take you to get your first paycheck?
Yeah.
From start to getting that first pay?
I think I didn't quite hear the last part correctly. Sorry.
From obviously, based on the title of your talk, you talked about essentially from noob.
Yeah.
Essentially, so how long was that? Was that because one of the things I think a lot of people misunderstand is how long the actual initial work you need to do to eventually be able to get one bug that is worthy of someone paying you money. So typically, from what I've heard, somewhere between 6 months to 1 year. So I'm keen to sort of know because especially for those who are wanting to get into bug bounty, so they kind of have that clear expectation of how long it's going to take before they hit that big paycheck, because it's not $1 million payday from day one, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I guess I'll just answer that part, and then we'll move on to the harder AI part. So I think my first bounty came in like probably after like a couple months I started, but I think that was like a really stupid like bug on a JavaScript file where like a key was leaking. And I don't really want to claim that as my first proper bounty. And I think it was up to like almost like a year of me, I guess doing part-time bug bounty that I found like the first P2 bug that I found, which I consider like one of my first proper bugs. So I would like actually say probably a year, but obviously that really depends on like what your background is and what your skill sets are. For me, so I had just finished. I think after finishing my uni, it was about almost like 1.5 years when I found my first proper bug. With regards to the using AI to write reports, I think if you found a bug and I guess you just want to write a nice report using AI, there's nothing wrong with that. But I guess I've been seeing a bit of like posts around some people submitting absolutely junk, using like finding like absolutely stupid stuff in curl, and then it got disclosed as well, where they're not really actually submitting actual bugs but just AI hallucinations to the program, which is I think pretty bad. Like, please don't do that.
So basically, what you're saying is it's pretty safe for someone to get into bug bounty right now. So it's not an area that LLMs is essentially going to take away. Like,
Yeah.
well, what is the likelihood of someone having a fully automated bug bounty program where they basically just get an NPC or an agentic engine, maybe using N8N or something, and then literally just get it to hammer at their web app or their source code? Do you see that happening?
So just to correctly rephrase your question, if I understood that correctly. So what was the question again? Sorry.
Okay. Do you see AI taking over bug bounty? That's really.
Do I see AI taking over?
Completely, like fully automated.
No, I think to some extent, and like I said earlier, maybe some bug classes, but not fully. There's gonna be lots of bugs that's still gonna take like human intervention to find and exploit. That's my take on it. Yeah.
Building on that question. Take the photo because I did it for the before speaking during our models with the photos when we.
Oh, like how someone can use AI to facilitate
So like,
hunting
I
bugs?
understand that it's not going to completely automate the process, but would it facilitate it?
Look, I think like I'm probably not in the best position to give like a definitive answer on like what and how like AI is going to change over the next like 6 months or 1 year. But I can say for sure at the moment that it's still like there's still a bit of time before we can start worrying that AI is going to fully take over and they're going to find all the bugs.
I've also I've been following someone recently on socials who targets bug bounties, and he's been making a lot of posts about complaints on vulnerabilities that he's identified and not being paid out.
Sorry, vulnerabilities being.
Well, like he's found a bug and hasn't been paid out
right, okay.
to what he sees.
See, I think there are like there's good programs and bad programs in bug bounty. There's definitely some programs, that will treat you unfairly. I guess the only really way we have as bug hunters at the moment is to just not hack on them so that you totally avoid that problem. I guess the good thing would be for the platforms to take action so that does not happen. But there is, I guess, some amount of unfairness where companies just pull cards like we know about this bug internally or fix it as soon as someone reports it and says that it was never there. That does happen as well.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure there's a lot to still work out.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
only predict so much, right?
Yeah, it's a bit mixed, honestly, bug bounty. It's pretty good. Like, if you find, like, I think all you need is, like, one good program if you want to do bug bounty, and find, like, one big program, and then, I guess, just hack on that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you, Animesh.